Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you to the Advanced Audit and Assurance Marking Scheme Insights. Now, this is a very important webinar as it focuses on the clarity for the marking scheme, which is a very important subject matter for the Advanced Audit and Assurance exams. A lot of time, the students don't have clarity on the marking scheme, which results in a lot of issues for students in terms of writing an adequate answer. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the marking scheme, or if you have no clear idea of the marking scheme, then eventually what will happen is that either you might be writing more or you might be writing less. Now we know writing more is a waste of time because you will not be completing the paper, and writing less would result in that you have an incomplete paper, which is not meeting the expectation of the marking team. So let's start the journey and let's start to look at the marking scheme insights with absolute clarity so that all of you know that what you need to do in your March 2020 exams. Now, just before proceeding further, a quick question. All of you can hear me. If you can just drop a yes in the chat box. Okay, now proceeding further, let's start looking at the marking scheme insights on most of the areas which comes in the AAA exams on a very regular basis. Now, in terms of the marking scheme insight, we need to look at the marking scheme of briefing note. We need to look at the marking scheme of risk assessment. I need to demonstrate to all of you the marking scheme for ethical, professional, and quality control issues. Procedures, evidence, actions, additional information, matters for practice management, acceptance decision. When a question comes on accepting a client and the examiner asks you to write matters, so we need to see the marking scheme for matters for practice management. Reporting question, the marking scheme for a reporting question. Communication of matters to those charged with governance. How many marks will you be getting when the examiner asks you the matters to communicate to those charged with governance? Going concern matters. How many marks you get for writing each going concern matter? Other assignments and knowledge-based stuff. How many marks you get when the examiner asks something about knowledge? So these are diversified aspects of the marking scheme insights, which I will be covering in clarity in my webinar today. Okay, let's proceed one by one with each of the insights. And again, just to check again, the voice is clear to all of you. Okay, let's proceed down and let's start on with the briefing note. Okay, now in terms of the briefing note, all of you must be familiar that you need to write the answer of the question number 1 in a form of a briefing note. Now, there is a very specific requirement of the question number 1, which is for 50 marks. And in those 50 marks, there are 4 professional marks which are allocated to writing a briefing note. So when you read the email of the partner in the exhibit 1 will tell you you should write a briefing note or you should prepare a briefing note. So when you are preparing a briefing note in the first question, of which there are 4 professional marks, how are you grabbing these 4 professional marks? Firstly, you need to write a briefing note, and I'll just be demonstrating it very quickly how you write it. But the briefing note gives you 1 mark for a suitable report style heading. So there is 1 mark for a suitable report style heading. So if you write a suitable report style heading, now what exactly is that? I will be demonstrating that. But if you write a suitable report style heading, you will get 1 mark for a suitable report style heading. You will get 1 mark for writing the introduction of the briefing note. You will get 1 mark for the logical flow of the briefing note, which is to write it in the form of A, B, C, D. So if there are 4 requirements, you will maintain the flow of the requirements A, B, C, D, and you will get an extra 1 mark. And there is 1 mark for the clarity of your explanation. How clear you were in your expression as a student. Now the examining team says most of the student scores 3 out of 4 marks, because clarity is something very subjective. So there is 1 mark for clarity, but the examining team says this is the most difficult mark. And most of the time, if you have seen the examiner comments, examiner is very clear in the comments by specifying that most of the student gets 3 out of 4 marks, most of the students. You must have seen the December 19 examiner report, or you must have seen September 19 examiner report, and even the June 19 examiner report. Examiner has been very focal that most of the student grab 3 out of 4 marks, not 4 out of 4, because the clarity mark is very subjective, because that's where some of the students can be good when they are expressing themselves, and some might be very bad. So this is the most difficult mark, the clarity mark, but at least you can grab 3 out of 4, which is a suitable report style heading, an introduction, a logical flow, and a clarity. Now I have been making it absolutely clear in each of my webinars I do for ACCA Pakistan that what exactly it means. If I demonstrate that in front of you, that when you are writing a briefing note, you will first put a heading in the exam paper, briefing note, because the examiner is saying a suitable report style heading. Under the briefing note, you will say to, from, subject. Now, this is exactly what you will be taking from the email of the partner, because in the exhibit 1, you will be having an email of the partner. So when you are replying back to the email, you will use the to, from, subject. So this is the suitable report style heading. Briefing note to, from, subject. This is the suitable report style heading. So when you write this, and at the end of the briefing note, you write a conclusion. That this is the structure of a report ideally. The examiner is saying when you have a suitable report style heading, briefing note, to, from, subject, and a conclusion, that is the first mark, right? Then under the subject, you need to write the introduction. So introduction is the second mark. But the examiner has been very clear that the student writes half a page introduction, even a page of introduction. And examiner has been very focal in the June 19 examiner report, in the September 19 examiner report, that the introduction needs just to be of 2 to 3 sentences. 2 to 3 sentences. The introduction cannot be half a page. The introduction is the purpose of writing the briefing note. Under the introduction, you need to maintain the logical flow. The logical flow is the requirements, as in like the A requirement, as in like the B requirement, as in like the C requirement. or as in like the D requirement? You will go into the logical flow, and at the end of the briefing note, you will write a conclusion. So this is an ideal format of the briefing note in front of your screen. Briefing note to from subject introduction must. Giving a conclusion is a must, then maintaining the logical flow. So if you maintain this structure, the examiner says 3 out of 4 marks is what most of the student attain. But how clear you were in your expression when you were writing the answer for A, B, C, D. If you were very clear, you were very impressive, your answer was very impactful, you might get 4 out of 4, but mostly it's 3 out of 4. That's how you structure a briefing note in the exam paper. I hope you've seen examiner answers for the structure of the briefing note, because that is very, very important marks. You cannot lose these marks in exam paper. Okay, now this is briefing note right in the first question. Moving on, risk assessment, such an important area and such a blur area for the student community in terms of the marking scheme. Let's see, we have a clarity on marking scheme for risk. Business risk, easiest marking scheme. When a question comes on a business risk, each business risk is worth 2 marks. So 2 marks each business risk. How are you taking these 2 marks? Issue, the issue which give rise to a business risk. So you need to find the issue from the case study, and you need to pick the issue from the case study, and then you need to tell the examiner how the issue impact on the business objective. So if you found an issue from a case, how will it impact the business objective? How will it impact the business reputation? Or how will it impact the business profitability? Or how will it impact the business profitability? Or how will it impact the business competitive position? Or how will it impact the business market share? So if in the exam paper you pick the issue and you link the issue with the impact, so issue and impact, but not the impact on the financial statement, right? The impact on the business objective. So examiner is saying there is 2 marks per business risk. Issue followed by the impact on the business objective. So if you can do these 2 things, there are easy 2 marks to gain. And I think ideal length of a business risk answer is like 3 sentences, max 4 sentences. It should not be bigger than this. 3 to 4 sentences should be an ideal length of a business risk answer, because you're just working on an issue and its impact on the business objective. Now, the difficult part of the marking scheme is in the other topic, which is audit risk and risk of material misstatement. Now, that's where I need to be more illustrative, because the other marking schemes like procedures, actions, ethical issues, professional issues will take very less time because they're very simple looking marking schemes. But this is a complicated marking scheme, and a lot of students have frequently asked questions on the marking scheme for audit risk and risk of material misstatement. Let's see what are the rules of thumb for the marking scheme for audit risk and risk of material misstatement. You must have seen questions on audit risk and risk of material misstatement which have a very specific requirement to utilize the analytical procedure. Now, if that requirement comes in an exam sitting which says utilize the analytical procedure, how many marks will a student be getting for utilizing? Will has the examiner set aside certain number of marks for you to utilize the analytical procedure? Because utilize means you're doing something. So will the examiner gives you certain number of marks for utilizing the analytical procedure? We need to see that. Number 2, 3-mark risk. In a question on audit risk and in a question on risk of material misstatement, there are certain risks which are worth 3 marks. Now, which risk are worth 3 marks? That's the next question mark. How many marks will you get to utilize? Number 1 question. Number two question, where will I get 3 marks? In which situation will I get 3 marks? And the last one, 2 marks. In which situation will I be getting the 2 marks? So there is a need of clarity that how many marks will you take when you utilize the analytical procedure? When can you take the 3 marks and when can you take the 2 marks? Okay, let's move on with the clarity. Okay, let me show you a question first, which will be better to demonstrate the clarity. This is September 18 exams, right? And September 18 exams, if I go down and I look at the first question, which is right in front of your screen, you can see that the requirement number A, and the requirement number A is asking students evaluate the audit risk. Now, there are certain audit risks which can give you 3 marks, and there are certain audit risks which will give you 2 marks. So I need to demonstrate that. But after the full stop, you can see the examiner is asking, you should utilize analytical procedures. You should utilize analytical procedure. How many marks I will be getting for utilizing the analytical procedures? Then after the full stop, the examiner is saying, you are not required. So examiner is refraining. You are not required. And a lot of times students don't read this not required and they do it. The examiner is saying you are not required to identify risk relating to disclosure. So if you mistakenly identify a risk relating to a disclosure, for example, there was a related party in the case, and you identified that the management could not have given a disclosure of a related party. Examiner is saying, I will not give you any marks if you write a risk relating to disclosure. So you should refrain from writing risk on disclosures. Rather, you should focus on other risk. So evaluate the audit risk, where some risk can be worth 3 marks, some risk can be worth 2 marks. And you should utilize the analytical procedures. That is how many marks? Now, this requirement in total is worth 24 marks. How would you take these 24 marks? If I just do a quick drilling. Now, this was the September 18 exams, right? Which I'm just taking as an example for the clarity of the marking scheme. September 18, question number 1, part A, which is worth 24 marks. And it says, evaluate the audit risk. That was the first requirement. Plus, it says, utilize the analytical procedures. Utilize the analytical procedures. And the third thing the examiner says is that you should not identify risk relating to disclosure. So you should not identify risk relating to disclosure, question mark. So you should not. So I need to do two things, right? Audit risk and utilize the analytical procedure. Now, when the examiner says utilize the analytical procedure, how many marks for that? Examiner says 3 maximum marks. So 3 maximum marks is for utilizing the analytical procedure as for the new marking scheme. If you see the old papers, it was even 5, 6. But now in the recent papers, examiner has reduced the marks for analytical procedure. The marks are 3. Utilize the analytical procedures and you have 3 marks for utilizing the analytical procedure. How would you utilize it? What does utilize means? Now, when you utilize, what you need to do? Number 1, you need to calculate 3 ratios with comparative. So you will calculate the 3 ratios with comparative and then link link each result of ratio. Link each result of ratio with the associated risk. with the risk of material misstatement. See how you do it. For example, I need to take 3 marks. So I would put the heading in the exam paper, results of analytical procedures. And under the results of analytical procedure, I will make 2 columns, 20x9, and the last year I'll put 20x8. I find my first ratio, current ratio, and for example, the current ratio in 20x9 was 1.64, just an example of 1.65, and last year the current ratio was 1.16. That's one ratio with comparative. I found my second ratio, gross profit margin. For example, the gross profit margin in 2020x9 was 34%. Last year, the gross profit margin was 30%. And then I found another ratio like the effective tax rate. For example, the effective tax rate in 20x9 was 10%, whereas the effective tax rate in 20x8 was 18%. So I calculated 3 ratios with comparative from the data given in the exam paper. Now this is not giving me 3 marks because this is just calculate the 3 ratios with comparative, which is my step number 1. So in my step number 1, I need to calculate the 3 ratios, which I have done. Then in the step number 2, I need to link them with risk to get my 3 marks. So under this, I will start to write my results. Number 1, I will see how much I need to write for 1 mark. The current ratio has increased from 1.16 to 1.65. There could be a risk. There could be a risk that the current assets are overstated and the current liabilities are understated. See, this is the risk which I can pick from the result of the ratio, that if the current ratio is improving, there is a chance that the assets could be overstated and the liabilities are understated, because that's exactly what the management do. But if you think there is something you can link to the case, there is something you can link in the case. For example, there could be a risk that current assets are overstated and current liabilities are understated. Current liabilities are understated, and you saw something in the case and you write, it is evident from the case, it is evident from the case that the current assets has increased by the current assets have increased by 24% over the last year, and thus could be overstated. So you link that to the case study. So the line I wrote in black was a very journal line, but when I read the case, I know from the case that the current assets over the last year in the balance sheet have increased by 24%. So I thought that 24% rise, there could be some element of overstatement 24%. Then I do the second commentary, gross profit margin. The gross profit margin has increased by 4% over the last year, has increased by 4% over the last year. There is a possibility, there is a possibility that sales could be overstated, or the cost of sales could be understated. Full stop. See, I'm working on the numerator and the denominator of the ratio. If you know the numerator of the ratio and you know the denominator of the ratio, you can easily think about the associated risk. So gross profit margin has increased by 4% over the last year. There is a possibility that the sales could be overstated or cost of sales could be understated. Then you can write something linked to the case study if there is a possibility. You say sales has increased by 10% over the last year, and the thus there is a risk of overstatement. There is a risk of overstatement. You're not sure. It could be that the 10% increase in sale is a factual increase. So whenever you write risk with could be. Whenever you write risk, you write risk with a tone of possibility, susceptibility. You never write risk with surety unless and until it's sure in the case study. Then you write the next and last risk. The effective tax rate has reduced by has significantly reduced or has drastically reduced from 18% to 10% in 20x9. It could be that the tax expense and liability is understated. Tax expense and liability is understated. Full stop. This is 3 marks now. See this 3 marks on your screen. I first calculated the three ratios and followed by that I made a commentary. But can you see my commentary? It's hardly 2 sentences for current ratio. It's hardly 2 sentences for gross profit margin. And it's just 1 sentence for effective tax rate. How many marks are you getting for the table of ratio and followed by the commentary? Just 3 marks. So how lengthy answer can you write for 3 marks? Can you see the commentary? Examiner says student calculates 10 ratios. Examiner says even student calculate more than 10 ratios. Use less. When the examiner is saying 1 mark per ratio, followed by the link to the risk of material misstatement. I hope that's clarified. Right? So this session is not about drafting. This session is just about a clarity and marking scheme, right? But I hope this drafting sense is also giving you a clear indication of how you are gaining the 3 marks. Right? So if you know the numerator and denominator of a ratio, you can easily find what is overstated and what is understated. And you generally know assets are overstated, liabilities are understated, incomes are overstated, and expenses are understated. So if you know that window dressing model, you can easily pick from the numerator and denominator what is under and overstated, right? And hardly 1 to 2 sentence per ratio, right? So this is not a big commentary. The student writes more than this. This is a very concise, short commentary right in front of your screen. So is that clear to all of you? When the examiner says utilize the analytical procedures, what exactly utilizing the analytical procedure mean? Right, 3 marks. So how many marks we had? We had total of 24 marks. So now you know I had 24 marks minus 3 marks for utilizing the analytical procedures. 3 marks I have for analytical procedures. So I'm left with 21 marks. Now you know 21 marks. There might be certain risk in the 21 marks, which can be a 3-mark risk. And there might be certain risk which can be 2-mark risk. Now you have to gain the 21 marks where some risks are worth 3 and where some risks are worth 2. When will you get 3? When will you get 2? Let's demonstrate that in front of you. A 3-mark risk is the one which includes materiality, treatment, risk, and impact. Treatment, risk slash impact is equal to 3 marks. Now, if there is a situation in the exam paper of which you can calculate the materiality, and then you write the treatment, then you write the risk and impact, this together is 3 marks. Let's give you an example quickly, because I need to focus on the other marking schemes as well. Suppose I take you back to the case study, and you go to the case and you start to read the case study from the balance sheet, right? And you see the balance sheet in terms of goodwill, note number 1. Please, it's very, very important that you look at the note numbers very carefully, because every note number can be a risk in the exam paper. Now you can see the note number 1 where the goodwill has increased from 970 to 1100. Now 1100 is the value of the goodwill, right? So you can find the materiality for 1100, that is the goodwill. But let's see what's happening in the note number 1. In the note number 1, it says goodwill relates to the group subsidiaries and is tested for impairment on an annual basis. Management will conduct the annual impairment review in December 20x8, but it is anticipated that no impairment will need to be recognized this year due to anticipated growth in revenue, which is forecast for the next 2 years. You are not recognizing impairment looking at the future. You're not anticipating the impairment looking at the forecast for the next 2 years. That is a wrong assumption of the management. You're looking at impairment as of today. When you are conducting the impairment review, you're looking at the present condition. You're looking at the present time. You're not looking into the future when you're conducting the impairment testing. So management anticipation that there will be no need of impairment is absolutely wrong and is very subjective, because you're conducting an impairment test looking at the situation as of today, right? Not as of future. So you have a point here, right? Firstly, what will you do? You will write the heading in the exam paper, goodwill. You will say materiality, because goodwill had a value. Goodwill. You will say goodwill of dollar. Goodwill of dollar 1100 million is a fill in the blank percentage of the total assets, whatever that is. Thus material to the financial statements. Full stop. The goodwill should be tested for impairment. The goodwill should be tested for impairment each year, taking into account the present condition as at the year end, and not the future assumptions or prospects. Accounting treatment. Thus, if management fails to recognize any impairment, if management fails to recognize any impairment relating to goodwill for 20x8, the goodwill could be overstated. See how I wrote it. My first line is the line for materiality. Then my second line is the accounting treatment. That's if the management fails to recognize. Fails to recognize is the risk, and the goodwill could be overstated is the impact. Risk and impact. Risk and impact. How many types of risk are there? Have you ever wondered about that? There could be a risk related to recognition, risk related to recognition. There could be a risk related to valuation. There could be a risk related to the classification. There could be a risk relating to a presentation. There could be a risk relating to a disclosure, though disclosure is not required in this question. There could be a risk relating to a disclosure. How many types of accounting treatments are there? Recognition, valuation, classification, presentation, disclosure. So in one situation, it could be a wrong recognition. In one situation, it could be a wrong valuation. In one, it could be a wrong classification. But what the wrong classification leads to, or what the wrong valuation leads to, or what the wrong recognition leads to. So overstatement is the impact. A lot of times students ignore impact. So it's the risk and the impact, right? Now this situation of the goodwill is giving you 3 marks. So when you have a materiality, treatment, risk and impact, you will get 3. But how many situations can you write like such an exam paper? Examiner says materiality marks are capped to maximum 3 in question number 1 for risk, because that's a big confusion. The student thinks this is a capping for the whole paper. No, this is for first question. Risk, only risk, part A. In the part A risk, examiner says that materiality marks are capped for 3. So how many materiality related risk I can find in the exam paper? How many materiality related risk I can find in the exam paper? 3. Because when I find one like goodwill, I will get 3. Suppose there is a second risk, asset held for sale. An asset held for sale has a value. I will get another 3 marks. Suppose there is another risk relating to intangible asset, and the intangible asset has a value. I will get another 3. But if there is a fourth risk in the question which has a value, I will not be getting the marks for the value. Even though I'm writing it, it is good to write it, but I will not get the marks. So if you comment on the fourth materiality, if you comment on the fifth materiality, are we getting any marks for the fourth and fifth and sixth materiality in exam paper? If you can just respond to that. If I comment on the fourth, fifth and sixth materiality, will I be getting any mark for that? No. But should I continue to comment after number 3? Should I continue to comment after number 3? It is a good practice to comment. It is a good practice to comment. So continue to comment. But are you getting any marks for commenting after number 3? No. But is it a good practice to comment even though I'm not getting marks? Yes, it's a good practice, right? To comment even though you're not getting marks. So now that means if I am taking a 3 marks risk, how many 3 marks risk can be there in a case? In the question number 1, the 3 marks risk can be multiplied by 3 risk. Max is equal to 9 marks, because examiner says the materiality marks are capped up to 3. So how many 3 marks risk I can find from a case study? 3 multiplied by 3 is equal to 9. So that means now whatever risk you write after is worth 2 marks. So how many marks I have to take? Reaching the 21 barrier. So that's how many marks? 21 marks minus 9 is equal to 12. 12 divided by 2 marks is equal to 6 more risk to be identified. So I need to identify 6 more risk. Even though I'm writing those risks with M, materiality, but I will be getting 2 marks instead of 3. So is everyone sound on that marking scheme? So if a question says utilize the analytical procedure minus the 3 marks, now see how many are left. Then think about, where will I get 3 marks? I will get 3 marks when I'm commenting on the materiality, treatment, risk, and impact. How many comments on materiality I can do in the first question? Examiner says the marks are capped up to 3. So you can only write 3 risk with MTRI. Then whatever risk you are writing, even though you are commenting on the materiality, whatever risk you're writing, you are getting 2 marks. Right? So that is the marking scheme for risk. I just spent time on it because I need to clarify. The rest of the marking schemes are very simpler, so will be wrapped up as quickly as possible. But this was a marking scheme which needs a bit of the demonstration. I hope now utilize the analytical procedures. All of you know the marking scheme now. So when the examiner says utilize, how many marks we will get for utilizing? For utilizing, I will get 3 marks. And how? 3 marks risk, the one which have M, the one which have T, the one which have R, the one which have I. And how many 3 marks risk I can find? 3 marks multiplied by 3 is equal to 9. 2 marks risk, all other risk. All other risk are worth 3 marks. After you have completed your 9 marks, all other risk are worth 2 marks. It is a very good practice that you calculate materiality even after number 3, because calculating materiality is a good practice even though you're not getting marks for it. But once you are done with 3 materialities, you will not be getting marks for materiality for 4th, but it is a good practice to do so. So continue on. Okay, moving from risk ahead. Ethical, professional, and quality control issues. It's a simple marking scheme. You will get 1 mark per ethical issue. You will get 1 mark per professional issue. You will get 1 mark per quality control issue. So whatever the issue is, ethical issue or professional issue or quality control issue, you will get 1 mark per issue. And you will get 1 mark per action, because examiner mostly asks for recommending action in an ethical question, in a professional question, and in a quality control question. So if you write an action, the action would also be worth 1 mark. So 1 mark per issue and 1 mark per action is the marking scheme for ethical, professional, and quality control issues. Focal point, how would you score it? When you're writing an ethical issue in exam, it's not just identifying the ethical threat in context of the case, but it's also the justification why it is a threat. So that's how you take your 1 mark. So you will identify the threat from the case and you will justify why it is a threat. If you say a self-review threat, you need to justify why. If you say self-interest, why. So when you put the why with the threat, when you put a reasoning with the threat, automatically the examiner will give you 1 mark per ethical issue. Professional issue. Again, it's to identify the issue, which is not the way the audit should have been performed, and its implication for the audit process. So you need to find the issue again, and you need to write the implication for the audit process. For example, if you think um, that no evidence was gathered on the existence of the packing machine, that I think that was a question in somewhere in September 16 exams, question number 2, where there was an issue that you had gathered no evidence on the existence of the packing machine. So you know this is an issue because most important assertion for an asset is existence. So if you have not gathered evidence on the packing machine existence, that is an issue. But what's the implication for the audit process? The implication for the audit process is that we have gathered insufficient evidence, or we have not gathered any evidence on the most important assertion for the asset, which is existence. So that means we have no evidence whether asset is existing or not. It could be fictitious. So it's to find an issue from the case, right? And to tell the implication of the issue on the audit process. Then only you will be getting the marks for professional issue. So something wrong in the case which you think is wrong as per the auditing process. If there was no planning, then that's something wrong because you know planning should be done. Or if the auditor has not performed the analytical procedure at the planning stage. Now you know analytical procedures at the planning stage is must be performed. So if you think something was done wrong in the context of the case by the auditor, which is contradictory to how the audit is done, you will find the issue and you will tell what's the impact of this issue on the process of the audit to get the 1 mark. And for the quality control issue, identify the issue again, which impacts the quality of the audit, and justifying why quality will be impacted and linking it to the fundamental of the quality control standard. For example, uh, the manager was absent or the manager was very busy during the audit. Now we know manager is much responsible for the review of work performed, or manager is very much responsible for the supervision of the engagement. Now we know supervision and review are very important elements of quality, which have been covered in the quality control standards. So if you think the manager was absent, so that is an issue, right? So you will say because the manager was absent, that means there must have been a lack of supervision of the engagement, or there must have been a lack of review of the working papers of the engagement. And then you link that with the quality control standard. You will say that review and supervision are important elements of the firm quality, or review and supervision are very important components of the quality of an audit firm. So this is given in the ISA 220, right? Or this is given in the ISQC 1. So you need to link the issue with the impact on quality, but it's very important that you connect it with the ISA. That you tell that, for example, you tell that leadership is an important element of quality. I hope you know the 6 elements of quality, right? Leadership, ethics, acceptance, monitoring, engagement, performance. So if you think there is an issue around the elements of quality control, and that element of quality control has been breached, so you need to tell the examiner which element of quality control is it linked to. So ethical issues, professional issues, and quality control issues. The focus is not just on the issue, but is to evaluate the issue. So ethical issues are done differently, professional issues are done differently, the quality control issues are done in a different manner, but each of them has a score of 1. Procedures. Each procedure will give you 1 mark wherever that is asked for in exam paper. So whenever you write a procedure, you get 1 mark per procedure, half a mark for a procedure and half a mark for a reason. For example, half a mark for a procedure and half a mark for a reason. Suppose if you're writing a procedure and the student was in a hurry in the exam paper, so he simply says discuss with management, but he didn't tell what and why. Discuss with management alone will give you 0.5 marks, not 1. But if you write discuss with management, the underlying basis, the underlying basis, of the fair value, the underlying basis 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 calculated, or used, so on and so forth. Try to relate that with something. Discuss with management the underlying basis of the fair value calculated or used in something. So that will give you 1 mark. You need to write a procedure with a reason. If you say review the board minutes, then you need to write after to confirm something. Or if you say review the calculation of the management, you need to write after to confirm what. So a procedure needs to be with reason. And I hope you must be familiar with my more popular mnemonic I use for procedure, that a procedure is the one which is with CVRM. A procedure which is case specific is good. Something coming out of the case is a good procedure. A procedure which has a verb means discuss, review, recalculate, analyze. A procedure should have a verb. A procedure should have a reason. So you cannot write a procedure without a reason, CVR. And the procedure should be 1 mark per procedure. So I normally use this mnemonic CVRM. And if most of you have studied from me or my resources, you must be having an idea of this CVRM. So procedure. Okay, now quickly down towards the other marking schemes. Actions. Actions anywhere in the paper. 1 mark per action, wherever. Action is such a common word, right, in the AAA paper. 1 mark per action. Additional information, wherever they are asked for. You mostly find additional information in the question number 1. Um, it also comes in the topic due diligence review. You must have seen the past papers for due diligence. Additional information, again, 1 mark per additional information. But again, half a mark for the information and half a mark for the reason. Right? I'm not demonstrating it, but I hope you're all familiar with the digital information. The purpose of the session is marking insights, not drilling. Even though I've drilled somewhere, just for the sake of clarity. Half a mark for the information and half a mark for the reason. 1 mark per additional information. I've been covering this as a regular topic in my webinars for ACCA Pakistan. Evidence. Question on evidence, you must have seen in the past paper, is divided into 2 parts. Sometimes the examiner asks in a question on evidence, comment on the methods and explain the evidence. Now, whenever the examiner asks you comment on the methods and explain the evidence, the comment on the methods in the evidence question, each method is worth 1.5 marks. Each method is worth 1.5 marks. Comment on the meta. Every meta is 1.5 marks, and the evidence is again 1 mark per evidence with reason. So again, evidence cannot be without reason, right? Procedure cannot be without reason. Additional information cannot be without reason, and they all have a 1 mark marking scheme. So when you're writing an evidence, the evidence has to be with reason. But when the examiner says comment on the matters will give you 1.5 marks each. Now, just here for clarity, when the examiner says in a question on evidence, when the examiner says comment on the matters, where every matter is worth 1.5 marks per meta. And I think made it clear several times that what are the matters? The matters are as follow: 1.5 marks per meta, and the matters are number 1, materiality. Over here, when you comment on the materiality, you will get 1.5 marks. When you comment on the treatment, you will get 1.5 marks. And when you comment on the risk and the impact, just like impact on the financial statements under an overstatement, you will get 1.5 marks. So in total, you're getting 4.5 marks. Now, it is exactly what you did above in goodwill. Now, the goodwill I wrote in a question on risk was worth 3. The same goodwill, if the same goodwill, if I write that in a question on evidence, will give you 4.5 marks. It will not change the length of your answer. The length of the answer will still remain the same. Materiality is just like a sentence. Accounting treatment can be 2 to 3 sentences. Risk and impact is a sentence. So this is giving you 4.5 marks, right? Comment on the matters. And then you start to write the evidence. The evidence will give you 1 mark per evidence with reason. And I've been covering this comment on matters and the breakdown of comment on the matters in my most of the previous webinars with ACC Pakistan. I hope you must have seen them and you know the breakdown. This breakdown must not be an unusual breakdown for you in the session today. There's another question which comes on evidence. I hope you've seen December 16 question, the question number 2 of the December 16 exams. The question 2 of December 16, which is an unusual question because it comes very less. The examiner says, comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence. Comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence. Over there, you will get 1 mark per comment. 1 mark per comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence. So there are 2 types of questions on evidence, right? And they have different looking marking schemes. Please familiarize yourself with the marking schemes of each and every question. Matters in accepting an engagement. Such a common question, and if you've seen the last 4 exam settings, this has been such a repetitive question. Matters in accepting an engagement. 2 marks per meta. Identify the meta, link to case, and justify why the meta is critical to accept the engagement. I hope you know the acceptance matters, right? Clients, if you're accepting a new client training, communication with previous auditor, deadline, fees, competence. There are so many matters, right? I hope you've read the article of examiner acceptance decision for audit and non-audit engagements. So whenever you do an acceptance, there are 2 marks per acceptance meta. But you need to identify the meta from case, link that to case, and justify why this matter is important in the acceptance of the engagement. If you are corresponding with the previous auditor, because you are accepting the new audit client, then what is the criticality of corresponding with the previous auditor? What benefit will you get, or how the previous auditor will help you in accepting the engagement? So that's how you write the 2 marks answer, right? And this question has come repetitively in the recent past. You cannot take the risk for your March 2020 exams because the examiner is asking this question more frequently now. Reporting. Anything asked for in reporting question is worth 1 mark. 1 mark per valid point raised in the reporting question, irrespective of the type of requirement. Whether the examiner asks you comment on the matters, 1 mark. Actions, 1 mark. Examiner asks you impact on the report. Every valid point for impact on the report will give you 1 mark. Critical appraisal of the report, 1 mark. So everything in a reporting question is worth 1 mark. No different marking schemes, right? And again, I've been very clear on the reporting marking schemes in my previous webinars. Communication of matters to those charged with governance. I hope you've seen questions on communication of matters. Question number 2, December 16 exams. And even the question number 2 of the June 19 exams. Communication of matters to those charged with governance. 1 mark per communication of matter or a deficiency. I think in December 16 it was communicating deficiencies, and in June 19 it was communicating matters. Now matters are broader than deficiencies, right? Deficiency is one of the meta. So at times the examiner make a narrow question communicating deficiencies to those charged with governance. And at times the examiner makes a broader question, communicating matters to charged with governance. June 19 question number 2 is about matters, and December 16 question number 2 is about deficiencies, but it's 1 mark per communication. Half a mark for the matter and half a mark why the matter will be communicated. So if you are communicating a deficiency, why? Or if you are communicating a wrong accounting treatment to management, then why? So the why is an utmost important thing in a AAA paper. You cannot pass a AAA paper without why. Going concern matters. You must have seen going concern questions. It's important even for March 2020 exams. I hope you've seen the past paper questions on going concern. There is a typical requirement which asks matters which may cast doubt. Now, every matter in a going concern is worth 2 marks, 2 marks per going concern matter which cast doubt. You need to find the matter from the case which casts doubt on the going concern of the company, and you need to justify why the matter will cast doubt. If there is an emergence of a successful competitor, how emergence of a successful competitor will bring doubt on the future of the company, uh, due to loss of market share, due to loss of sale, what? So you need to justify your point. Then every going concern matter will give you 2 marks, and it's quite potential for March 2020 exams. I hope you've seen the past paper for the going concern matters. Other assignments. There are so many things which comes in other assignments. If you have seen the past paper for prospective financial information, due diligence, forensic audit, audit of performance information. And you know, audit of performance information is very important for March 2020 exams, and the prospective financial information is also very important for the March 2020 exams. Right? So many things in other assignments. Number one, common requirements. Acceptance matter. A lot of time you must have seen questions on other assignments which ask you matters before accepting engagement. Now, matters before accepting engagement, we just covered them on my preceding slide. So whenever you're writing matters for acceptance, 2 marks per matter, whether they come in other assignment or they come in any other question. Procedures, inquiries, additional information. So many times we have seen in other assignments the requirement additional information or procedures or inquiries. Inquiries, procedures, additional information, actions, they're all worth 1 mark. Knowledge stuff. A lot of time you must have seen knowledge stuff like examiner asking you the difference between something, or the examiner asking you the purpose of something, or the examiner asking you a scope of something. Knowledge marks are 2. 2 per point. Meaning of something, importance of something, benefits of something, common things, right? Benefits, purpose, importance, difference, 2 marks. Forensic. If you've seen the past papers on forensic, if the examiner asks you any matters in a question on forensic, apart from the acceptance matter, right? Acceptance matters are 2. But if the examiner asks you the matters for forensic matters are 1 mark each, right? And I think that one time the forensic matter came in was in June 13 exams. June 13, question number 2B was only one requirement where the examiner asked for matters specific to forensic. I think matters very specific to theft came in that question. So that was worth 1 mark because that's just what I've right. Steps in planning. Same question. June 13, question number 2B. Examiner asked for steps in planning. So steps means 1 mark. 1 mark per step. Step. Every mark, every step is worth 1 mark. And matters for due diligence. If the examiner asks you a due diligence matter, which is in December 13 and December 17. December 13 question of due diligence and December 17 question of due diligence. Then matters for due diligence is worth 1.5 marks. Matters for due diligence is worth 1.5 marks. Matters for forensic is worth 1 mark. And the acceptance meta, matters before accepting engagement is worth 2 marks anywhere in the paper. Right? So these are common requirements which comes in other assignments. Knowledge-based areas in across the AAA. Wherever in AAA, you get to write differences or benefits or advantages or purpose or meaning or scope, 2 marks. Uh, you must have seen scattered questions where examiner tends to ask, explain the meaning of something or importance of something, benefits of something. Such marks, two per each, 2 marks per, right? So these are knowledge-based areas. Now, I tried to be as comprehensive as I could be, trying to cover numerous aspects of the marking schemes, which could be really important for all of you. I try to maximize them, right, into this session, right? I hope this session must have been a good one for all of you in terms of your clarities on marking scheme, because I just try to bring them at one place. Because a lot of times the student asks, can you have one consolidated document of marking scheme? So I thought let's do a webinar on the consolidation of the marking scheme and bring them down at one place of clarity. So I tried covering every crucial aspect of the marking scheme for every crucial area, common areas, core areas for the AAA, and that is very important. Okay, if you can just quickly drop your overall feedback for the session as I try to wrap up the session. Right, I've covered so many aspects of things in my webinars with ACCA Pakistan. This is just an extra session for the benefit of the AAA community to bring them closer to the marking scheme, because these webinars are just additional supports, right? A lot of things cannot be covered in these webinars due to limitations and due to the fact that these are just additional supports to student community. So you need to understand the constraints and limitations as well. If you can just drop your feedback about the session today before I try to wrap it up. Okay, so please, the marking scheme is very important. You might write less, you might write more if you are unclear of the marking scheme, and could be disastrous for your exam setting. Writing more and writing less both can be a cause of a failure in the AAA paper. So you should have a clarity of the marking scheme, and that was the purpose of holding this session uh, with a view of the marking insights, because a lot of time you encourage students to read the marking scheme from the examiner answer, but they don't bother to read it, or even if they do read, they don't make the proper understanding of the marking scheme, because at times it's difficult to understand that. So I thought this session should be arranged for the benefit of the student community, and that you get perfect clarity on marking schemes insights, so that if you have any confusions, you can be clear. This session was live, but it's equally being recorded as well. So once the recording is ready and done, I'll be uploading it on my YouTube channel, and so that you can get to watch it later if you missed it, or you had any voice distortions and voice issues because of the weak internet at your end. You can watch it later on the YouTube channel. It will be there on my YouTube channel by tomorrow, so you can uh, go and watch it and even recommend to other students who are appearing for the triple exams in March 2020. Okay, it's time to sign off, time to say you goodbye, and wish you all a very best of luck for exams in March. Have a nice day. Prepare yourself effectively for exams, and be connected for any queries over the WhatsApp group. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.